Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Music for Self-Isolation chat. My name is Frank Horvat, and it's a pleasure to welcome flutist Lish Lindsey, based in New York City. She was born in South Korea, grew up in New Jersey, and now currently resides in New York City's theater district, where she's talking to us from today. She is an accomplished flutist. She is a teacher, freelance musician. She's played all around the world and with many different orchestras, and yeah, and you've played with a lot of huge artists: Josh Groban, Sarah Brightman. Oh my gosh, these are huge names and stuff. So, Lish, it's a pleasure to have you part of this project. Thank you so much for joining me for this chat today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Obviously, we're talking about, we're recording this video right now. It's the summer of 2020, and we've been in basically North America, Canada, the US. We've all sort of been in this sort of lockdown mode. Just let's go back to March. I think March is when everything really started to shut down. Like, what do you remember about the time in which you were going on with your everyday life, and then all of a sudden everything changed?
Well, the way that I was affected the most first was just for college teaching, having to pivot over to how am I supposed to now get in touch with my students who are concerned about what's going on. So I think that was the first thing that I realized, like, well, maybe this is going to be short, just a little bit. And it was just very internal, like here, like how am I going to get on the computer and change everything for them? And then after that, it got a little bit crazier. And so had to kind of figure out maybe this is going to last longer. But I mean, I think I took it seriously. People were very, very sick. But it was before I heard of anyone that I knew getting sick. So it was kind of like, well, I'll just stay inside and not go out and just leave it at that.
Like I was the same way, just like, oh my gosh, now I have to sort of like, I can't see my students anymore. So this is like, I got to figure out the technology and stuff. But do you remember like where there was a point where you were like, this is way more serious than just sort of an inconvenience?
Yeah, I think for me, it was probably whenever spring breaks happened for schools, when they said, okay, we're going to either add a couple days, we're going to add a week, we're going to skip a week, everyone needs to figure this out. And then the more I heard from my students still being worried, it's like, and hearing some people are like, oh, my mom and dad are sick. We don't know what it is. Maybe it's COVID. We don't know. The more I heard about that, probably the end of March, that's where it kind of I paid more attention to everything that was going on.
How about for performances? Did you have a lot of performances canceled? Things that you were like so looking forward to, and then all of a sudden, poof, they're gone.
Yes, I had a bunch of chamber concerts, and okay, like the dork in me definitely had some Star Wars planned for, like, big beginning of summer event for one of my orchestras. Yeah, they all made the safe decision just not to continue, I think, before other people decided to also kind of postpone stuff. Yeah, so there were a lot of things that I had to kind of change in my schedule. I realized, though, it's interesting, I was going to delete everything, and I decided not to. So I could see, like, okay, these are how things are affected right now by this. And I've left it as it is. And the things for like 2021, I left them the same. So we'll see what happens. I've been very fortunate not to get sick yet. Maybe because I have buckled down very seriously, and yeah, I've been a hermit and taken it so seriously. So part of it, yeah, I feel kind of like I didn't have to travel anywhere, and my schedule, probably like your schedule, it was a lot of traveling set up. Like today, I should have been in Dallas performing in a recital for a big flute convention. But it is nice to be at home with your family. And I feel a little guilty because before, dealing with people getting sick, I kind of always wish, like, well, maybe I wish I had a little bit more extra time. I wouldn't have to travel so far and spend X amount of time getting from one gig to the next gig or getting to my next teaching gig and just hustle, hustle, hustle. And suddenly it's now thrown where, oh, I don't have excuses not to get stuff accomplished that I always wish I could. So maybe that was part of it too, just trying to get a little bit of that and feeling a little bit good about it, that I had the time for myself. Yeah.
I think that's very important. I think that's we have to in times like this. First, make sure that we're grounded and we're healthy and we're in a good spot if we're going to be able to think about the wider world. So, um, now, obviously, being a flutist, number one thing in your life is breathing.
Yes.
I mean, it's like we always talk about, like when I'm teaching piano, it's like breathe, breathe, but we do that in a sort of thing. And of course, for singers, the same thing. But as a wind player, have you thought a lot about the fact that the world is having this pandemic right now, and the number one thing that it's impacting for people is their lungs?
Yes.
This COVID-19 is this terrible virus that really attacks people's ability to breathe. How have you sort of make that connection of being a flutist and that's your thing versus that?
Well, first, my husband has a really good friend of his who got very sick, and he plays saxophone and flutes, woodwind player. And reading his account and hearing about how it affected his breathing and how he could not take deep breaths, that was the first time for me as a musician. I really thought about, like, what am I doing to produce a craft that I've been working towards for so long, constantly trying to be better at this. Um, so yeah, I've been thinking a lot about that physical aspect of what I do. And then part of me is also thinking about, well, what other instrument can I learn? Should I go into composition? Should I really, follow through with some of the stuff that I've been doing there? And kind of trying to also change direction. Will I need flutes are dangerous right now? People keep saying. I was in a meeting and someone's like, "Oh, you flute section, you're like, right now potentially the worst group," and we were all like, felt really bad. Uh, so yeah, that's something I didn't really think about too much either. Like the aspect of what I might do to someone else is horrifying, and then I might be the worst spreader out there, because of the instrument that I have. So there's that component, but looking for other outlets, like what happens if this just keeps going? And, violins, at least for now, cover up. A lot of people can still continue what they do well, but I need to rethink some things. And so that kind of at night, makes you, when you're going to bed a little bit, you really have those deep thoughts about, let's think about tomorrow, maybe the day after, maybe the day after that. But I don't know how far in the future I want to think about it in reality. Yeah.
We're usually wired, for we ramp up our practice and getting close to the performance, or we got a recording session. So we really work hard because I think as musicians, I don't know about you, but I tend to be very goal oriented. It's like, that thing coming up, but all of a sudden, all of those traditional things that usually drove us, to work hard and practice hard, all of those are gone. So talk to me about that. How did you keep up your motivation? Like, what were you doing like on a daily basis to keep that up?
Honestly, your piece, when your project started to kind of pop up all over the internet, I think yours was one of the ones that I was just like, ooh, I like his writing. I like his music. This is cool. But yes, I think it's driven by, all right, it's time to kind of put something that's out there. And to take your idea of your project, that all these other people were doing the same thing. It was very communal to know that maybe there is another flute player out there at the same time looking at this piece of music and studying it and figuring out how can they express themselves through this piece. So it was more motivating to see people be posting, and it had been a while, of putting things out there for me. I've been too busy. And as you know, I think we want to put out quality content. I don't always want to put something out that I'm semi worked on or sight reading. That's like not so much my style. But I really like the idea that I could sit down and think for once. No one's bothering me on a timeline. But I had to set a timeline though, because if I didn't, I don't know if I would have all these projects completed, and plus getting it on the computer and dealing with all of that stuff. Yeah, so it's been good.
And I find that putting on content online, like if I'm other than composing, I do a lot of piano performing as well, and I find that a lot of times the motivation about putting on a performance online, there's a lot more impetus for it to be even better because it's there for posterity, right? And it can be replayed over and over again. So just that drive to get it right, and work hard so it's right is really strong,
Mm,
Yeah, very
kind of
interesting.
horrifying, a little scary.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm a firm believer that often in life we tend to do our best work when we're afraid, right? We
It's so
need
true.
it's a fear of embarrassment or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So that's huge. And so, like online stuff, it's like, if there was a small crowd for a concert, and you played a few wrong notes, well, it'll just slide over their head, but somebody can repeat this thing over and over again. So that's wonderful. So let's look into the future here. What's your concerns? Where do you try to oppositely get some positiveness about optimism? Where and what are your fears and what are your hopes, fears, and dreams when it comes to the future of what we do?
I am extremely happy that the people that I've been talking with, that musicians, artists, that they haven't given up. You know, people are still producing, and they're producing with the intent to have live people see their work, hear their work. How are we going to get an audience to come see us? How do we get a paying audience to come value what we've prepared for? Or do we just try to support each other, donate for each other? But I don't know how long that everyone can do that internally for each other, since we don't have jobs, in the performing field right now. So that scares me a little bit also. So that the unknowing, what's going to happen, the unknown. Yes, that's scary. I'm hoping in my heart that it's going to go back, and that people know it's valuable and important, and that maybe people stuck at home are restless and they do want to go back to the opera or to a Broadway show or a play. So I'm going to stick it with that. Like I'm just going to be really, cuz it's more comforting mentally for me to think that people haven't given up and that they're getting itchy at home and they want things to be open. So, but finding the funding, that is another thing. Like, where are people putting the extra money then? Is it going to other projects? Will they remember the small opera company? You know, I, I don't know.
You play with so many groups. You're a soloist. You play with orchestras. Let's talk about something really important that musicians love to think about and obsess about: money. So obviously, a lot of people are struggling a lot. I think from what my experience talking to friends and stuff, basically, if you don't teach and you only gig, you're struggling now.
It's hard to ask for help, right? So, yeah, if you don't have the teaching gig, I'd like to think that the circle of support, when people ask for help from their friends and their colleagues, that we're there to be like, what do you need? How can we all chip in to help you get through this next stage? I think that's what a lot of us are doing right now. Like, but not everyone asks for help. And I know big companies, they ask for help right away. They go to the people that have given their donors or sponsors, and they can ask. So it's, yeah, how does a regular person communicate that without feeling that they're ashamed of needing the funding, or no one shows up to their house concert online and they don't make as much money as they don't. That worries me. I think the individual person. But if we don't always know that everyone's struggling, how do we help if we don't know our friends and our colleagues need that a little bit of assistance?
Now, in the best of times, the world we encompass, the classical art music world, is definitely not let's say, a capitalist endeavor in the best of times. A lot of us are doing it for the love of it. a lot of organizations that make our opportunities happen are not for profits. Um, how are you concerned about how the pandemic, just in general, and the impact it's made on society might impact a greater society's ability to support our endeavor? Because a lot of it is definitely done in a very charitable fashion.
I think we're gonna I think we're gonna lose a lot of the small, nonprofits, unless there's a way that people are becoming very innovative or reinventing what they're doing. So if one thing falls off to the wayside, do you have enough energy, or can you find that little interest group that's there to help support? I mean, yeah, casualties.
For sure. So let's talk a little bit about just the pandemic, just in general. Um, you live in my you live in my absolute most favorite city in the world. There's they everywhere. Anybody says the greatest city in the world is New York City. There's an energy there. What was it like these last few months to look at your city be like? It was like a sci-fi movie. I saw pictures in the news and stuff of Times Square, and there's not a soul anywhere in the middle of the day. I mean, what has it been like to be a New Yorker through this whole time?
There's two sides, right? There is, we know we need people in the city, because it's the only way the city can run, right? But people can't be in the city. So yeah, to be out there and not see people, no tourists, it's that's sad. Like I walked around, 2 days ago, yesterday maybe, I had an appointment somewhere and I came back, and to see all the restaurants in my neighborhood, they're just, you wonder what's going on, because I've been trying to get as much food delivered and stuff like that to help people as much as possible in my neighborhood. So you see like this, you see every, like, the people who live here trying to get by, but the people that kind of get everything to keep going have been absent for so long that you still notice it. You don't have to push people away on the sidewalk when you're walking. And so that is just, even though that might be an inconvenience for me trying to get from one place to the next, or was, I miss it now, because that means that no one's here to help, with the economy, for example, for the tourism. Um, there's no traffic. It's gotten worse, actually, over the last month as things start to open up here. But that's one side of it. It's like, oh, great. Like, if you want to drive into the city, you can drive in. But on the other hand, but that's bad, because then people aren't coming into the city. So it's trying to wrestle those two things. It's still challenging here. It's weird to see all the shows shut down, too. Yeah. Because you know how many people, are employed in each one. And yeah, that's hard, um, to deal with. And they just don't know. So
How has the city been reacting, or almost looking back, or are people not looking back about this, the terrible statistics about how many people were dying in New York? I mean, it was, you know, every day it was in the hundreds. It was like, I remember September 11th, in 2001, and it was almost like, not to belittle that terrible tragedy that was so impactful on a generation, but it's almost like this past spring, it was like that was repeating, but it was like every day, like, what's your sense of the city reacting? Are people angry? Are they mourning? Have they just sort of try to shut it out and they're still shell shocked and they're going on? What's with that?
the vibe that I've gotten is more that people are just kind of just moving forward, just every day. Because if you think about it, and I don't know what people do when they're at home watching the news at night, looking at the numbers, but like that's kind of stuff like I try not to look at until the end of the day to see what's happening like right now across the country, what's going on with numbers. But I know it's like kind of, it's unbelievable because it's kind of mysterious. It just, yeah, I, maybe I'm like most people. You don't want to think about it too much, but I'm going to wear that mask because I'm scared. So, yeah, that's what I think about.
I think that's all you can do, because if you get too bogged down in watching the news, like it's just so much bad news. And of course, depending on your political view, the political mismanagement of all of this, it's been staggering. So, I think sometimes we walk through life a little bit shell shocked when something terrible is happening. We don't even realize it, and then I think we'll need like years later, we might look back at this time period and like be able to more objectively assess stuff.
Yeah, and process. Right, exactly. Exactly.
So let's end on a happy note.
Okay.
Because we've been so impacted, in many ways, directly, indirectly by the pandemic. How do you think? How do you think? How do you think the world has actually gotten better? Has there been any good that's come out of this? Not just for musicians, but just the world in general as humans or whatever.
I think there is more awareness now of people, that people, if we're seeing what had happened earlier in Italy, and that's where I should have been this summer, it's like that connection that, let's say COVID, right, is not discriminating. And it's just going to hit wherever it's going to hit with whoever it wants. It's a sad reason to come together over something. We shouldn't have to come together over something like getting sick. But it definitely kind of opens up, all right, this country is having some challenges. We have challenges. How can we help each other figure this out? And not think about, people going after each other and trying to get a vaccine first, like all of that, not thinking about that. But maybe for me as a normal person that's just going about, right, that, I care about about this. What's happening to my students, their families, and then that radiates out, to my colleagues, and that goes out and out and out into all the communities. So maybe the good part is just feeling more connected and wanting this to stop, to get fixed, and to not let our career, like being musicians, not stop. Like that's so, like, just not to be like, I'm totally pivoting away from music. I joked a little bit about finding another instrument, but I'm not going to put my flute or musical stuff down. I'm sure I can find something else to do. But that has given me a little bit more like, well, I got to do it. If someone else is going to do it, I have to move forward still. And I still want to move forward in music in some way. And it seems like the people, at least I've been around, have felt similar. Just randomly, my parents are not musicians. Like I was adopted, so if it's genetics, like we're not the same. They are music lovers, but I feel like they understand how important music is now more than before. And I think they're tuning into things more than they ever have. So that is a personal positive that I think is important, that kind of moves me forward. Well, somebody's out there listening to this stuff. Somehow I'm contributing, I hope.
You also said something there that I really feel like I have to touch on. So sorry, I'm going to go back to something a little more serious, but I think I'd really like to get your feedback on it because it's something you just said. And I want to get your feel and your perspective as an Asian American and the world we're living in right now, especially in your country, with a lot of emphasis being placed on social justice issues and so forth. How do you think the pandemic and the resurgence of racial justice has been a thing, especially because of the fact that a lot of very ignorant politicians have been using very inflammatory language in the past months in relation to the pandemic. So talk to me a bit about your thoughts about the relationship of the pandemic and our relationship to each other.
Well, I know from my experience when just not great language was being used for this, I specifically did not go outside just because of the way I look. Like I've made a decision like, no, I'm not going to go around the block just to take a walk. uh, and that was just something I knew, like, it wasn't something I wasn't thinking about. It's like, I'd rather not be talked at or yelled at, and I don't, by anybody. So I actually, for a very long time, I stayed in, and that was part of the reason, as I, just because people will say crazy things, but that's tiring. And right now, because people are saying this because of, this whole COVID situation, it's like I really don't want people to get up in my business. And so, I mean, I did have to change the pattern of how I think. And it's New York. Under regular circumstances, things are said a lot. I get stuff. But in this situation, I know I really was like, no, I'm not even going to stress about this. I'm going to stay inside and just let this kind of go. So that's just personal. Oh, it sucks, doesn't it? But then again, at least I'm safe in my house for now. And but yeah, things politicians are not always making, just don't understand people sometimes at all. The words that people choose to use uh, just influence others in a negative way sometimes.
Yeah. Well, I have a personal theory that it's just people people who talk with such inflammatory language are just, they have no compassion or anything. You know what I mean? You're not a it's just like you have serious mental health problems yourself,
Mm.
dealing with empathy and compassion. And if you can't see that for fellow human beings, we're all on this planet together, having to get through this together. It's just, it just boggles my mind. So on a final note, a happier note, because you have to end happy. That's the rule in this kind of thing. You actually, and I hope I'm not going to ask you to repeat yourself, but you did touch upon this a bit. But look, actually, more specifically, talk about yourself just in general. Like how do you feel like you've gotten better personally throughout this whole thing? How has this changed you in a positive way and given you hope looking forward? What specifics about the experience of living through the pandemic has made you a better person?
I definitely have taken more time for myself than I've ever had over the past 10, 15, 20 years. The hustle is still there, right? Like, I think a lot of my life, I mean, hustling in like the best possible way, to survive, to have a job. Um, but I have gotten a chance to kind of explore a little bit who I am more. And being older now, to kind of put things in perspective than when I first got here, like 20 years ago. It's crazy. So I'm glad to have the time, I think, to be able to play music that I want to be working on, to kind of, sounds really dorky, but the act of just blowing, into my flute, it's like, I'm glad I can do that right now. I mean, I can choose not to, but I can choose to go and work on music. I can choose to go listen to a great recording of something I had not listened to in forever, by an awesome orchestra. I can play some new music because there's so much of it right now that people just want their music performed. So yeah, it sounds selfish, but I feel a little more alive than I have. I feel happier but sadder. But individually, when I wake up in the morning, I am definitely kind of excited to move forward. I'm not dragging my feet. Yeah, I like that. Are
In
you the
the
same?
end, yeah, absolutely. No matter how bad anything gets in life, we always can take solace in the fact that we have music. Music is the best medicine. On that note, thank you so much for doing this. It's been really awesome, and so happy to finally meet you in person, even though it's through these electronic means. But I really appreciate you sharing your perspectives today.
Thank you so much.